Hello and welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. Trump's criticism of Israel's strike on Qatar puts Washington's support in doubt. Russian drones violate Poland's airspace as NATO hesitates. Testing US defense promises. New tariffs on China raise the spectre of a global trade war. America struggles to balance Iran, Israel and Gulf allies. With BRICS ascendant and Latin America pushing back, the United States appears powerful yet unpredictable. Its global role under sharp scrutiny. Now, joining us to discuss all of these issues and more is Rick Sanchez. He is a journalist, author and host of Journalistically Speaking. With decades of experience across global media networks, he has covered major international events, translated complex issues for audiences in English and Spanish, and now hosts programs from Moscow. Thank you very much for joining us, Rick, here on Focal Length.
It's a pleasure. It's really nice for you guys to have me. I appreciate it.
Pleasure to have you. Let's get straight into this. Let's move over to West Asia, where, of course, Trump's criticism of Israel's strike on Qatar was unusually blunt after killing 6 people in the Qatari capital. Is the US support for Israel shifting, or is this just a temporary public clash, if you can call it that?
In a word, saying that the United States position on Israel is shifting would be absolute, what we would say in America, bull crap. No, the United States is stuck on Israel, unfortunately. Israel dominates whatever comes out of the United States. And it's not necessarily because of Mr. Trump, but it's more in line with some of the people who are getting into Mr. Trump's ear. Those are the people in the State Department. Those are the neocons. Those are the people who control the weapons manufacturing companies. And unfortunately, we just learned the confirmation of that yesterday when my friend Tucker Carlson, who I talk to and share notes with, as well as Colonel McGregor and Judge Napolitano and some of the other people in the United States who are trying to combat the very non-America first opinions that exist in the United States. Tucker just did an interview with the guy from the State Department who was fired because he was pushing back on some of the things that were going on. And he explicitly said that the guy who runs the United States when it comes to foreign policy in the Middle East are people who are absolute neocons. Huckabee, for example. Huckabee is more powerful right now than the U.S. president when it comes to foreign policy in the United States. And he's the ambassador to Israel, as you know. Unfortunately, if Huckabee calls Mr. Trump and says, this is what you have to do, Mr. Trump says, aye, aye, sir. That's exactly what I'll do then. I mean, that's just the way it is. Let's not fool ourselves. Who are we kidding? And do you think for 1 minute that the United States, my country that I love, because it's the country that, you know, allowed my immigrant parents to go there and much of my success is due to this great country, because it is a great country with a great constitution and a wonderful people and a great process and a great system and a great many things. But unfortunately, our leaders are pigs who have sold themselves out a long time ago, and they'll do anything Israel tells them to do because Israel pays them a lot of money.
Rick, do you see this shifting at all? I mean, if you look at the modern media circuit, this is a bipartisan issue of these modern internet commentators, both left and right, criticizing the state of Israel. And of course, the war in Gaza is a focal point, but also the US support for Israel and the fact that US tax dollars being used in their wars is also a major factor. The old hawk Republicans, of course, will continue to support Israel. However, in 10, 20 years' time, do you still see the Israel and, of course, AIPAC having that grasp over the American government?
No, and I like the way you phrased that question that time, because maybe I misinterpreted your first question. I think you were asking me at first, is Mr. Trump, or is the internal workings of the U.S. government in terms of foreign policy shifting? And my answer to that would be absolutely not. It is not. Yet. Absolutely no. Not. Is public opinion changing in America? Absolutely yes, it is. It's changing on the left. It's changing on the right. It's changing within the MAGA faction itself. And the reason it's changing is because there's a Mr. Trump and others said America first. They didn't mean America first, and nothing is proving that more than what's happening right now with Israel, and that's being sensed inside the MAGA movement. And I mean, look, let me just be honest with you. From a ideological standpoint, the conservative movement in the United States has never exactly been very pro-Israel, except for in the very religious parts of, those folks who were recruited by Israel to push the Pentecostal and other extreme Christian opinions. But generally speaking, most Republicans and most conservatives in the United States have always been like, we can love it or hate it, and they're not necessarily going to be going in that direction. But now they're angry. They're angry at what Mr. Trump is doing vis-a-vis Israel, just like they're angry at what Mr. Trump is doing vis-a-vis Epstein and the lack of transparency there. They're angry to some respect with what Mr. Trump is doing with Ukraine. And they wanted him to be the anti-Biden, right? Biden was pro-war, whatever the neocons told him to do, he did. And along came Trump, and he said, I'm not going to be like that. His speech in Saudi Arabia. I mean, yes. I heard that speech, and I thought, yes, finally, an American president saying, to hell with the neocons. But they were just words. They were just words. There's a difference between saying something and doing something, My father always taught me, you judge a man by his actions, not what he says, but what he does. So far, I have to tell you, my country, what it's doing is not what it says it wanted to do.
Yes, and Rick, let's briefly turn over to Europe. And of course, Europe's defining crisis, the Russia-Ukraine war. Just a few days ago, Russian drones entered Polish airspace. NATO stopped short of calling it an attack. How far do you think the United States is willing to go to defend its allies in Europe in a broader spectrum here and after this incident?
I think Trump deep down gets the fact that the world is changing. And, look, it's like if you and I are making a basketball team, right? And you get to pick first and I get to pick second. Too fat and slow and can't jump. And I'm going to make my team filled with fat, slow guys who can't jump. And you get to pick the tall guys who are strong and muscular and are going to do very well, right? You're going to beat me. Well, it's not too hard to figure out that the tall, muscular, strong guys are India, China, Vietnam, Russia, Malaysia. A lot of these countries in this part of the world, they have GDP growth. India's GDP growth is 6.8%. China's is 5%. Russia's is 3.8%. Military capacity, natural resources. I mean, you just go down the line, right? So does the United States want to align itself with these puny little countries that used to run the world? Countries like Germany that has a GDP growth of negative 0.2? Or France with a leader who's at 29% approval rating, or the UK with Starmer who's at who's at 23%, or countries that have inflation rates that are beyond the pale, have no natural resources, and wages are decreasing. I mean, just do the math, right? I mean, if just common sense says, if you're picking a football or a basketball team, or whatever team, and you've got to pick players, why are you aligning yourself with losers? Go with the winners. And the fact of the matter is the United States, and I think Trump gets this. My sources tell me inside the State Department, and I can't name names, that he understands it, but he's getting so much pushback from the establishment folks
Yes.
that it's hard for him to move in that direction. So it's kind of like a draw right now when it comes to my answer to that question. I hope I didn't complicate it or make it too long.
No, of course not. Let's now move on to his economic policy. Do you think Donald Trump is strengthening America's economic leverage when it comes to his tariff policy, or risking a global trade war that undermines US leadership?
That's a great question. Here's my take on that. I think the basic notion that America needs to come up with a policy that creates manufacturing in our country is a good idea. And I think Mr. Trump it's a well-founded principle that the U.S. has gotten so far away from manufacturing and has relied on the rest of the world to do its manufacturing. We rely on India to do all our services, when it comes to finances. We rely on China and Vietnam to do everything when it comes to manufacturing products, which Americans have become addicted to when they go to Walmart and they go shopping, et cetera. So I understand what Mr. Trump was trying to do. He was trying to create a base of manufacturing in the United States because there's no jobs in America when it comes to manufacturing. So I get that. And I give him props for that. It's a good idea. The problem is the way the tariff policy has been implemented. It has created so much confusion, stability, that nobody understands or knows where he's going to go next. Unfortunately for my president, one day he says it's going to be 50%, then it's 30%, then it's 15%, then it's back to 30%, and it's all over the place. Well, as you know, if you understand business, which I'm sure you do, or even if you just have your own, household in your home, you can't make decisions of the future based on instability. Consistency is the key to stability in any kind of business. So I don't blame, Mr. Modi for walking away from Mr. Trump when Mr. Trump told him, he was going to increase his tariffs to 50%, because Mr. Modi and the people around Mr. Modi, or maybe even smarter than Mr. Modi, or in the business world, say, yeah, it's 50% today, but what's it going to be next week, right? So I think that instability is partly the part that I have a real serious issue with. It has to do with execution, and the execution has been folly.
And Rick, let's now move to South America next. And the US is tightening sanctions on Maduro's Venezuela, while also clashing with Brazil over trade. And Bolsonaro's conviction, of course, just convicted to 27 years in prison. Is Washington's influence in Latin America waning as regional powers assert more independence?
It's a great question for me, man, because that's where I'm from, right? I mean, I'm Cuban, so I come from that part of the world. I love America and I'm American, but I'm still a child of my father and my father's lessons and what he taught me when I was a little kid. And America is not seen well in Latin America. America's had 75 to 100 years of doing nothing in Latin America but taking, abusing, killing, assassinating, fomenting coups. You look at countries like Guatemala, where the United States went in. They didn't like the guy who was elected, so they literally took him out and started a civil war that killed 200,000 people. Look, Latin Americans know that. Whether you're a Colombian or a Cuban or you're from Santo Domingo or Nicaragua or Mexico, you know the kind of that history. So you're looking for Latin America to be a little better, and China has moved in and started to do some pretty favorable looking things in countries like Venezuela and Brazil, as you mentioned. So has Russia, so has Iran, interestingly enough, India to some respect. So the world is kind of moved into a part of the world next to the United States that the United States has always treated like crap, like a stepchild. And that stepchild now sees there are other people who are suitors who are paying attention to it, and they kind of like the affection. And that's the problem the United States has right now. And you're right, Venezuela is particularly difficult. I mean, gosh, this story about blowing up some 12-foot fishing boat with an engine this big. I mean, my fishing boat is, 40 times bigger than that, and I wouldn't even move drugs on it. It's such a joke to use the military to blow up a tiny boat that couldn't even have gone from here to the golf course you see behind me where I'm spending a Saturday afternoon. It's crazy. But it's what they did because they want to move on Venezuela. No, you mentioned Bolsonaro. The Bolsonaro thing is interesting. I mean, the case with Brazil and Lula da Silva is one where you have to look at what is sovereignty, right? What is sovereignty? A nation's right to determine who goes to jail, who's prosecuted, et cetera. And that's what Brazil is saying. So, that goes back to the other thing I was just telling you about. If you're going to base your tariffs on punishing a country because of their court system or because they're prosecuting somebody who you like, what the hell is that? That has nothing to do with market principles. That has everything to do with vengeance. So once again, it goes back to the thing I was telling you before, where the business community is looking at this and saying, no, you can't make decisions like that based on something like that, and we're not going to trust it, so we're just going to ignore it. And that's unfortunate.
Rick Sanchez. Rick Sanchez, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure having you on the show. Well, that is all that we have time for on this episode of Focal Length. And with that, it's a wrap on this episode. For more international news and updates, stay tuned on NewsX World.